Good afternoon to each and every one of you. Welcome to Walking Through History on this Good Friday afternoon. My name is Nick Angel, and joining me as always is my good friend Alan Seenestrang. We are excited about continuing our study through the book of Joshua. We have looked at the first 9 chapters. Up until this point, there's been a lot of action that has taken place, a number of battles and kind of crazy situations we've read about so far. We are excited to be getting into chapter 10 today as we see a number of additional battle scenes, plus some pretty incredible feats carried out by the Lord as Joshua and the people are making their conquest. Thank you for being here today. Hope that you'll be blessed by our considerations today. And as we state on a regular basis, the more we know about God's word, more knowledge we have of it, we believe that gives opportunity for greater faith and trust in him. Thank you for joining us today, and may God bless us as we go throughout this study. Alan, it's good to be with you. Hope that you're doing well today.
Doing good. Still in the middle of all the moving and stuff, but we're out of the old house. We're in the temporary house and just swimming in all our stuff right now. But we'll figure it out eventually, hopefully.
Yeah, swimming in a sea of boxes. I have been there and done that. It is it's quite a fun situation to be in, needing a particular thing and not knowing exactly which box that it is in. That's why one of Katie's jobs, whenever we move, she labels all the boxes. Mm-hmm. She does that, number one, because she knows where most things are. But number two, her handwriting is actually legible, so you can read what is in the particular boxes. That is not my job, because we would not be able to tell what is in each box. But thank you for being here with us today, Alan. Glad you have a few minutes for us to go through this text of Joshua 10. And again, thank you to those who are joining us today. Let's go ahead and get into the text. We're going to split this text into 2 halves since it's quite a lengthy read. We're going to do the first half, which deals with the 5 Amorite kings and their struggle against Israel. Then we'll pause and give some comments on that first half of the text, first 27 verses, and then we'll read the rest of the text, which talks about the conquest of the southern cities within the land. Let's go ahead and get into the text, though. If you have a Bible, I invite you to join me in Joshua chapter 10. If you don't, that's fine. We'll have the text here on the screen. You can follow along with us as we read from the Christian Standard Bible. Joshua chapter 10 and verse 1. Now King Adonizedek of Jerusalem heard that Joshua had captured Ai and completely destroyed it, treating Ai and its king as he had Jericho and its king. And the inhabitants of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were living among them. So Adonizedek and his people were greatly alarmed, because Gibeon was a large city, like one of the royal cities. It was larger than Ai, and all its men were warriors. Therefore, King Adonizedek of Jerusalem sent word to King Hoam of Hebron, King Piram of Jarmuth, King Japhia of Lachish, and King Debir of Eglon, saying, "Come up and help me. We will attack Gibeon, because they have made peace with Joshua and the Israelites." So the 5 Amorite kings, the kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon, joined forces, advanced with all their armies, besieged Gibeon, and fought against it. Then the men of Gibeon sent word to Joshua in the camp at Gilgal, "Don't give up on your servants. Come quickly and save us. Help us, for all the Amorite kings living in the hill country have joined forces against us." So Joshua and all his troops, including all his best soldiers, came from Gilgal. The Lord said to Joshua, "Do not be afraid of them, for I have handed them over to you. Not one of them will be able to stand against you." So Joshua caught them by surprise after marching all night from Gilgal, and the Lord threw them into a confusion before Israel. He, referring to the Lord, defeated them in a great slaughter at Gibeon, chased them through the ascent of Beth Horon, and struck them down as far as Azekah and Makkedah. As they fled before Israel, the Lord threw large hailstones on them from the sky along the descent of Beth Horon all the way to Azekah, and they died. More of them died from the hail than the Israelites killed with the sword. And on that day, the Lord gave the Amorites over. On the day, the Lord gave the Amorites over to the Israelites. Joshua spoke to the Lord in the presence of Israel. This is what Joshua said. He said, "Sun, stand still over Gibeon, and moon over the valley of Ajalon." And the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, until the nation took vengeance on its enemies. Isn't this written in the book of Jasher? So the sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed its setting almost a full day. There has been no day like it before or since when the Lord listened to a man, because the Lord fought for Israel. Then Joshua and all Israel with him returned to the camp at Gilgal. Now the 5 defeated kings had fled and hidden in the cave at Makkedah. It was reported to Joshua, the 5 kings have been found, and they are hiding in the cave at Makkedah. And Joshua said, roll large stones against the mouth of the cave and station men by it to guard the kings. But as for you, don't stay there. Pursue your enemies and attack them from behind. Don't let them enter their cities, for the Lord your God has handed them over to you. So Joshua and the Israelites finished inflicting a terrible slaughter on them until they were destroyed, although a few survivors ran away to the fortified cities. The people returned returned safely to Joshua at the camp of Makkedah, and no one dared to threaten the Israelites. Then Joshua said, open the mouth of the cave and bring those 5 kings to me out of there. This is what they did. They brought the 5 kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon to Joshua out of the cave. And when they had brought the kings to him, Joshua summoned all the men of Israel and said to the military commanders who had accompanied him, come here and put your feet on the necks of these kings. So the commanders came forward and put their feet on their necks. And Joshua said to them, do not be afraid or discouraged. Be strong and courageous, for the Lord will do this to all the enemies you fight. And after this, Joshua struck them down and executed them, and he hung their bodies on 5 trees, and they were there until evening. At sunset, Joshua commanded that they be taken down from the trees and thrown into the cave where they had hidden. Then large stones were placed against the mouth of the cave, and the stones are still there today. If you recall from our last study within Joshua, in chapter 9, we read the account of the Gibeonites deceiving Joshua, pretending themselves to be a nation from a far away land, which would have given them the opportunity to make peace with Israel. The reality is that they were one of Israel's neighbors at this time. They were within the land among Israel. Yet instead of consulting with the Lord, Joshua and the people made a covenant of peace with them, and they became their servants, their slaves. And you can read at the end of chapter 9 that their jobs were wood cutting and water carrying. They were able to have peace with Israel within their own land. What takes place here is that the king of Jerusalem, which it's kind of weird thinking about it, thinking of a king of Jerusalem that was not a part of God's people. But we have to remember they were coming in to conquer the land. That's what they're going to do. This king, Alan, here is what has happened with Ai, with Jericho, the peace with Gibeon. And he says, we have to do something about this. This nation that has come up from the south, they're causing a number of problems. We have to do something about them. They think about going up against Gibeon, but the text says, Alan, that Gibeon was a large city, like the royal cities. So he has to concoct a plan. How can I go and give a strong showing of force against this people who had made friends with the enemy? How can we show them that is the right thing to do? So Alan, he decides to make an alliance with these kings of the Amorites. What do you see within this text of what takes place with these Amorite kings, with Joshua, specifically with the Lord? I think the biggest takeaway for me in this text, Alan, is the Lord's part in this particular portion of the story. What do you see here that stands out to you and that you think is being emphasized within the text?
Definitely, it's interesting. Each of these campaigns that's highlighted, we have Jericho and Ai, and now this campaign against the 5 kings. Victory is achieved in vastly different ways each time, but each time there's an element of it's clearly God fighting for them. Whether it be the miracle of the walls coming down at Jericho, or obviously a great miracle here. But even with Ai, I mean, they were first defeated and then they won. Well, what changed in that instance? Well, God was against them before, and then he was with them in the victory. So just I think that's why these are highlighted, because they are so different. We wouldn't really help us to see the same battle plan, 5 different times and read about it. So I think that's why that's highlighted. But it is interesting, and there's definitely some wisdom amongst the Amorite kings, and the fact that they gather a large force. They realize, okay, well, Israel is a force to be reckoned with. Now they've basically gathered up Gibeon as an ally. So what the kings are doing now is they're attacking the weakest of the alliance.
Right.
Clearly, Gibeon, they surrendered, so they are the weakest. Well, if we can take them out first, we're probably more powerful than Gibeon. Those 5 kings were bigger than Gibeon, which they were, because Gibeon, was surrounded and besieged and asked Israel for help. So they thought this was an easy way. That's just, common military sense. You try to piece off. If you're fighting a superior foe, you try to, take out chunks of their army one by one, separate them and take them out. And I think this definitely highlights the attitude of these Amorite kings versus the attitude of the Gibeonites. The Gibeonites were fearful of Israel and fearful of God, and it saved their lives. And here you would hope that other cities would do the same and possibly surrender, or do something similar like Gibeon did, and submit to the God of heaven and the Israelite army. But of course they gathered up against them and fought against them, just as expected here. And it's amazing, we see later on how the level of the miraculous way that God defeats them, I think is really just that, plus the whole scene with the feet on their necks is just showing not just them but the world, that God fights for Israel. There is no one that can go against him, and even even the cosmic forces fight for Israel in a similar way. So don't continue to fight against fight this losing battle. But of course they will continue to do that. And again, this is still early in the campaign to take the nation of the land of Canaan, and there's still going to be kings and cities that continue to fight against Israel. So they did not learn these lessons, and they did not properly fear who was coming to attack them.
And that's right. You would think, it's even mentioned here within the text that he had heard that Joshua had captured Ai, and that he had done with Ai just as he'd done with Jericho. I'm sure that he had heard how this had taken place, that they had marched on Jericho, they had blown ram's horns, the walls fell down. Well, that in and of itself is just an incredible thing to think of, and surely would have caused Adonizedek some great concern. And then they turn around and they simply just outwit Ai in the conquering of that city, drawing them out, sneaking in behind them, taking the city, and then sandwiching them in. It just shows the arrogance, I believe, and the pride of these nations, the stubbornness that they have to think that they could go up against Israel and have any shot of success. And you think about it just from the perspective of how this battle took place. Think about what the Lord did here in this particular battle from verses 9 through 14 or through 15. First, there's the confusion. It says that the Lord threw them into confusion before Israel. But not only did he do that, but he then threw large hailstones on them from the sky. This is verse 11, as they were making the descent from Beth Horon all the way to Azekah. But then there's the episode of what takes place in verses 12 and 13 with the sun and the moon standing still. There is just an incredible showing of power here within this text. And I think this really is written in such a way to emphasize what the Lord did. And I particularly think that, considering what is seen in verse 11 itself, at the end of verse 11, where it is specifically noted that more of them died from the hail than the Israelites killed with the sword. Well, who's the one that threw the hailstones from heaven? It wasn't Israel. It wasn't Joshua. No, that was the Lord and his power. And if you think that was incredible, think about the fact that the Lord made the sun and the moon to stand still. I assume that this was done to give more time for Joshua and the people just to go ahead and completely annihilate the armies of these Amorite kings. And what an incredible thing to take place. And even more, and so incredible that it's not just written here within this historical writing, but you can also see that it was written in the book of Jasher, which is one of these very interesting mentionings within the Bible, the fact that the Bible quotes another book. It does so in the book of Jasher here is written, but this is one of two times that the book of Jasher is mentioned in Scripture. It's also mentioned in 2 Samuel 1 and verse 18. Some writings of David mentioned there. That just shows how incredible of an event this was, that it was not just written through inspiration and the recording of it within the book of Joshua, but even written about in this book of Jasher. Certainly anybody who saw this, who was involved with it, would have wanted to tell everybody, listen, do you know what happened here? Do you understand how we accomplished this? It wasn't just that we were better warriors, but it was that the Lord threw them into confusion. The Lord threw hailstones at them. The Lord caused the sun and the moon to stand still. What an incredible feat this would have been. And what an incredible thing for the surrounding nations to hear that, hey, do you realize how Israel won this war? Certainly this would have been a warning to the nations surrounding Israel that you don't need to mess with these people. They've got things working for them that you simply don't have.
I love this verse. It kind of highlights something we wouldn't prioritize, but verse 14 says there's been no day like it before or since. Obviously, we would think, because the sun stopped. Well, yeah. I mean, there's 24 hours in a day. It's been that way for all eternity except this day. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't really highlight that. It mentions when the Lord listened to a man, because the Lord fought for Israel. So it makes it seem like the miraculous thing, or the most important aspect of that day was how it was, I think, Joshua's faith, that he could say something like this. I mean, we don't really see that at all in Scripture until Christ commanding something, having such great faith to, he talks about the faith that moves mountains. Well, we don't really see that except in this instance. I mean, he, spoke to the Lord and, basically, commanded the sun to stop, and the Lord listened to him. So that was the amazing thing about this. It wasn't, I mean, obviously the Lord stopping the sun, I mean, that's amazing, but that's, nothing for the Lord to do. He created it all. But for him to listen to something like this is incredible. And I can't think of any other time that the elements like that are listened to a man, except when, Jesus calms the storm or something. So this is kind of a once in a lifetime, once in a eternity kind of event here.
You have the mountain moving faith that's mentioned in the gospel. So here you have the sun stopping faith. Mm-hmm. And there's a little idea somebody might have for a lesson. What can your faith do? Can your faith move mountains? Can it stop the sun, stop the moon? Who knows? But what we have here, I think what you're emphasizing there is exactly what's being emphasized in the text. That's Joshua's faith in God that helped this to take place, and the emphasis, of course, are being rooted in what God can do. And I didn't even mention what is said in verse number 8. As the people of Gibeon go to Joshua and ask for help, which they are, you might think of that in that moment. Well, here we go. Joshua made this mistake by having this treaty with Gibeon. Here come the Amorite kings going in to destroy them. Well, this kind of fix that mistake. If they're done, then there's no longer any issue there. But we have to remember that they made this covenant with peace to them. Well, now they've got to protect them, because now they're a part of the nation of Israel. They're part of this people as their servants. Therefore, they have to protect them. And in the process, the Lord says in verse number 8, do not be afraid of them. for I have handed them over to you. Not one of them will be able to stand against you. That right there should give us the first clue that the Lord's about to do something incredible. And he does so through the confusion, through the hailstorms, or the hailstones, and through the sun and the moon standing still. They have this great victory over the armies. And yet the kings somehow sneak away, as seems to be the case most of the time. And they go into this cave at Makeda, however you say this word. Make sure to put the emphasis on the right syllable. But Joshua says, again, kind of a reversal of what we see in the Gospels, where Jesus rolls the stone away from or the angel rolls the stone away from the cave where Jesus was buried, the tomb where Jesus was buried. Here, Joshua says, let's put a stone over the mouth of this cave. And after we put the stone over, they can't escape. We're going to go ahead and we're going to go take care of the rest of their armies. They chase them. They defeat them. They were completely destroyed. Let's see, verse 20. So Joshua and Israel finished inflicting a terrible slaughter on them until they were destroyed. So a few of them were able to run away to the fortified cities. But then they go back to this cave. He brings them out. And there is this great showing, as you mentioned, this showing of the power that God and his people have over the people of Canaan. That you want to see just how superior we are to you. Well, we're going to disrespect and show just how puny you are by putting our little feet on your necks. And surely this, again, I was saying this earlier to you, that this will be one of those stories where it'd be really cool to see on screen. If somebody recreated this in like a TV show or a movie or something, just to see this take place, must have been surely incredible to see the power that God and his people have over these Canaanite nations. What you have on the screen here, a little map that shows us the path that they took as they're going about this process, Alan.
Yeah, you can see it's a much larger area than we've really been dealing with. So you get the sense that this isn't just one single day and then they can defeat all. This is probably a longer campaign, but you have Gibeon way up here, kind of right in the middle of the screen, and then the cave of Makeda down toward Lachish and Hebron. I mean, this is 20, 30 miles. So this is a pretty far distance. So if this all is taking place in one day, which, we know that the day was a lot longer.
That's right.
It makes sense because of the greater distances. Obviously 20 or 30 miles. I mean, that can be covered in a day, but that's a long day. Plus they've been fighting. It's also interesting. I just noticed when we reread it that it mentions how Joshua marched all night from Gilgal and surprised the 5 kings that were besieging Gibeon. He surprised them, I guess, in the morning. So the poor Israelites, they've been marching all night. Now they're fighting all day, and the day's even longer. So I'm sure they're getting pretty tired, but I'm also sure that God was with them in whatever way to keep them going. But it gives you the sense. I mean, this whole entire area. We're basically looking at all of what will become the land of Judah right here, and being pretty much conquered and taken care of here. But you mentioned the king of Jerusalem being kind of the ringleader. We know that Jerusalem won't be completely conquered until the days of David. So while there is a great victory here, it wasn't complete. Or if it was, then Jerusalem was lost at some point in the between years. But there was still a lot to do and a lot to be done. But there's a lot. We know it's such a small area, but there's a lot of people, a lot of cities in this land, and a lot to. It's going to take decades to conquer completely.
But this particular campaign, Alan, is not over, because we do read back in verse number 20 that there was this terrible slaughter on them until they were destroyed, although a few survivors ran away to the fortified cities, which gives us a little bit of foreshadowing, because remember, the Lord did say back in verse number 8, no one will be able to stand against you. Some have escaped. So now it's time to go and take care of them as we continue the reading of the text from Joshua chapter 10. In verse 28, on that day, Joshua captured Makeda and struck it down with a sword, including its king he completely destroyed it and everyone in it, leaving no survivor. So he treated the king of Makkedah as he had the king of Jericho. Joshua and all Israel with him crossed from Makkedah to Libnah and fought against Libnah. And the Lord also handed it and its king over to Israel. He struck it down, putting everyone in it to the sword, left no survivors in it. He treated Libnah's king as he had the king of Jericho. From Libnah, Joshua and all Israel with him crossed to Lachish, and they laid siege to it and attacked it. The Lord handed Lachish over to Israel, and Joshua captured it on the second day. He struck it down, putting everyone in it to the sword, just as he had done to Libnah. At that time, King Horam of Gezer went to help Lachish, but Joshua struck him down along with his people, leaving no survivors. Then Joshua crossed from Lachish to Eglon, and all Israel with him. They laid siege to it and attacked it. And on that day, they captured it and struck it down, putting everyone in it to the sword. He completely destroyed it, destroyed it that day, just as he had done to Lachish. Verse 36, next Joshua and all Israel with him went up from Eglon to Hebron and attacked it. They captured it and struck down its king, all its villages, and everyone in it with a sword. He left no survivors, just as he had done in Eglon. He completely destroyed Hebron and everyone in it. Finally, Joshua turned toward Debir and attacked it, and all Israel was with him. He captured it, its king, and all its villages. They struck them down with the sword and completely destroyed everyone in it, leaving no survivors. He treated Debir and its king as he had treated Hebron, and as he had treated Libnah and its king. So Joshua conquered the whole region. Remember, we're talking about the southern region at this point. The hill country, the Negev, the Judean foothills, and the slopes with all their kings, leaving no survivors. He completely destroyed every living being as the Lord, the God of Israel, had commanded. Joshua conquered everyone from Kadesh Barnea to Gaza and all the land of Goshen as far as Gibeon. Joshua captured all these kings and their land in one campaign because the Lord, the God of Israel, fought for Israel. Then Joshua returned with all Israel to the camp at Gilgal. What really stands out to me, Alan, in this is that last portion, verse 42, Joshua captured all these kings and their land in one campaign because the Lord, the God of Israel, fought for Israel. That just goes back to what we've seen about this entire book of Joshua, is the Lord seeking to give them encouragement, going all the way back to chapter 1, Alan, where we see the Lord saying for the first time in chapter 1 and verse number 6, be strong and courageous, be strong and courageous, for you will distribute the land I swore to your fathers to give them as inheritance. Above all, be strong and very courageous to observe carefully the whole instruction my servant Moses commanded you. Let's see here. And this verse number 9 is what I was thinking of. Haven't I commanded you, be strong and courageous, do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. What is Joshua told his own people here within this text? That they needed to be strong and courageous. They did not need to fear those those whom they were going up against. Why? Because verse 42, because the Lord, the God of Israel, fought for Israel. I'll bring up that map again, Alan, and we kind of trace the direction, if you still have that the people took as they went. So it starts out where? We start out at Makkedah, which is, let's see here, is that there on the map? Yeah, there it is. Kind of the bottom left-hand portion of the map, Alan. And then they start making kind of a little route there. They go from Makkedah down to Libnah. Let's see, or I guess up a little bit to Libnah. And then from Libnah, they go to Lachish, so then they go south. And then from Lachish, they continue south, go to Eglon. From Eglon, they go to Hebron. And then from Hebron, they go to, Debir. And then that's it. That's everything. That's the hill country, and the Negev, the Judean foothills, the slopes, everything. All those people who had joined forces with Jerusalem, the king of Jerusalem, they met the same fate that their kings did. They were completely destroyed and judged for the wickedness, which really, I guess, something that we'll probably mention on a regular basis as we go through these studies, Alan, of the conquest, is that this wasn't the Lord just being hateful towards people who were not Israelites. This was judgment for the sins that they had committed by rebelling against the Lord, and their paganism, their idolatry, and the things associated with that. Alan, what do you see here within this last section of Joshua chapter 11 that stands out to you that you might want to bring to our attention?
One mentioned, right at the end, it kind of summarizes this campaign, and it mentions Kadesh Barnea again, which would have been just off the map somewhere around here. Well, that was where the Israelites spent probably a big chunk of their wilderness wanderings after their failure to go in and conquer the land with the taking the advice of the 10 spies. So it's interesting that that's highlighted, and think about it. If they're sitting there, I mean, within miles of these cities, that's where they were for 40 years. So they might, I doubt they would recognize this area. They didn't really get into the land, but if they travel just a little bit farther to Kadesh Barnea, they're back where they kind of were a couple of years earlier. So this is the area, and they were, think of it, they were too worried, too scared. They saw all this area and all these cities and all these fortified cities, and they were too afraid to conquer it. And then here, 38, 40 years later, here they are finally conquering that area, which they could have done so much sooner, but because of their lack of faith. So it's interesting that this area, the southern area, gets conquered first,
right?
And then that highlights the wickedness of these Amorite cities and kings, because they would have been, they would have had interactions with the Israelites. It's just too close of an area for them not to have interacted with the Israelites during the wilderness wanderings, because they were just so close here. So they would have at least heard of Israel, heard of everything that happened with the crossing of the Red Sea, much like, if obviously it got all the way up to Jericho, but this area more than anything would have had interactions with Israel, and yet they still fought against them. So it, like you mentioned, they destroyed, I think it talks about how they wiped out every living thing. Well, it was well earned to say that. The Lord was just when he says that here in verse 40. He completely destroyed every living being as the Lord, the God of Israel, had commanded. So you see great faith by Joshua, and you see great justice here by God as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, that is something that is stressed time and time again throughout this last section, just the complete destruction. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I'm seeing at least 14 times there is something mentioned about either leaving no survivors, everything being completely destroyed, everyone being put to the sword. This is, as was mentioned earlier, a terrible slaughter. That this was complete and total judgment upon these people. And again, the thing that stands out to me is Gibeon. Gibeon is the one city, the one people who saw the writing on the wall. They saw these people are not to be messed with. Whatever we need to do to get on their good side, we need to do that. So we need to submit ourselves to them. Let ourselves be them. Let us be their servants, or else we're going to get destroyed. None of these other kings, these Amorite kings, they did not have that type of mindset. They wanted to try to stand up against them, against Israel, and against their God. And for that, they were completely destroyed. And again, they were with all their kings. Verse 40. Let's see. Joshua conquered the whole region with all their kings, leaving no survivors. He completely destroyed every living being, as the Lord, the God of Israel, had commanded. They had their chance to be like Gibeon. They chose to be different, and for that, they were completely punished. So this is, as you mentioned, now this is only part of the conquest. What we're going to see in chapter 11 is the conquest of the northern cities within this land. That's what we're going to talk about in our next study on Tuesday. Alan, do you have anything else that you want to bring up from this text to close and finish up for today?
That was about it. you were a trooper getting through all those names, man.
Hey, man. Yeah, we didn't read through too many genealogies, so I'm just trying to do my best to get through here. That's the good. I've found numerous websites where you can go and listen to people say particular names and cities from the Bible. So that definitely has helped in certain points, because some of these you just have no idea. So again, probably don't have the right emphasis on the right syllable, but I'm doing the best I can, and hopefully people are able to keep up as we're going through this text. Definitely appreciate all the Smiths and Joneses in my life, and just patient with those seeming strings,
Sorry about that.
Well, it's been good. It's been good to read through this text with you, Alan, and talk about it with our audience. Thank you all for joining us today. Hope that it has been beneficial to you. I hope you do leave being impressed by the Lord's provisions within this text. We really want to try to understand just how much the Lord did in all this, that it was not because Israel was mighty. It was not because Israel was the best army, the most well-trained, the strongest, but it was because of the Lord being with them, the fact that the Lord fought for Israel. They were able to have these great successes. And I hope you all recognize that the Lord is willing to fight for us as well. He is with us as his people, as we struggle through this life against the evil, wicked influences that are around us. He fights for us, and he will strengthen us to overcome. Hope that will bring us great encouragement today as we've read through this text. Again, thank you for being with us. Hope you join us on Tuesday as we continue to work our way through Joshua. We'll be reading Joshua chapter 11 Tuesday, working our way through it. Hope that you could join us for that. If you're looking for a church family to join within worship on Sunday morning, hope that you'll join us here at Pleasant Plains. 384 Pleasant Plains Road is the church building's address. We'll be meeting at 9 a.m. for a time of worship. Hope that you can join us for that as well. If you're not able to get out, we will be streaming that assembly live on Facebook and YouTube for those who again might not be able to get out at this time. Thank you so much for being with us. God bless you. God bless you this weekend. Alan, thank you as well. Take care, brother, and we'll see you all soon as we continue our studies of walking through history, the story of God and his people as found within the Bible. Thank you, guys. God bless you all.